process is probably a little bit different, okay? Everyone's going to have a different attorney, they're going to have a different alderman, they're going to have a different architect, different contractor. So it's important to kind of understand there's a lot of nuance here. So we're going to talk about my experiences with this, and you might come back in 6 months and be like, Andrew said this and it went like this for me. Yeah, there's going to be some differences, and like anything in politics or anything in real estate in general, there is a lot of nuance, a lot of variations. Individual experiences do vary. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So this is my silly disclaimer, but I'm not an attorney, right? So we have a good one that we use, and I suggest if you want to like get into the nitty gritty about your specific scenario. Even more so, all the other things that I mentioned before that are different, every building's a little bit different. It's got a unique set of zoning rules. It's got a unique neighborhood. The alderman's or alderwoman's position on zoning changes and additional units is going to vary. So always consult with an attorney before going about this process, and that's usually the best piece of advice I can ever give you on any of this stuff. And I got a good one if anybody needs one. So. All right, so what is an additional dwelling unit and what is the ordinance? I'll go through some of the basics. So basically in 2020, the City Council introduced this pilot program to bring back some old world rulings on adding an attic or basement apartment to a building. So a lot of people were already doing this. They said, okay, let's make a path to legalization a little bit easier, right? The city's lacking affordable housing, as many of you might know already. So there was a need for this, and the fact that it's not been adopted across the whole city yet is kind of a surprise to me still. But if you talk to most aldermen, they are supportive of expanding this across the city. So there's a lot of rules. It's a lot of work. Okay, so like we're on at least month 12 on one or two particular buildings right now. Some of it's our own fault, but some of it's the process's fault. I don't cover cost and timing. I should have, but I'm going to talk through it on the slides. And I have a blog post on our website too that's a little bit more detail on this, but we'll go through all of it talking, but I'll address where I missed some stuff in the slides. Just so everybody's clear, there's two main paths with the ADU program, okay? Either you're in the ADU zone or you're not, right? So if you're in the ADU zone, it's a very similar path. There's just like one or two steps missing. Okay, if you're not in the ADU zone, adding a basement unit is possible, or a part or attic, or additional dwelling unit. You just have to go about a few extra steps. So let's go to the next slide. All right, it's a really shitty map, but there's 5 zones: the north zone, northwest, west, south, and southeast. Okay, so yeah, you gotta kind of look at it, but. If you go to Chicago's got a website published where you can zoom in, check an address, see if you're within the boundaries or not. It makes zero sense. Okay, this was carved out by a bunch of aldermen a number of years ago, but like there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason why it's mapped out like this. Okay, like I mentioned before, when we presented to the zoning committee, I don't know, 6 months ago. We got a lot of head nods when the speaker was like, hopefully we'll be reintroducing this bill in the next year to expand it across the entire city. This is called a pilot, so these are the 5 pilot zones. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. All right, so what does the process look like for adding a unit when you're in the ADU zone? So first step is to submit an application with the city. Either you're going to do this or you're going to have an attorney do this with you. So, but there's the link to it. I'll give you this. Okay, cool. There's a link to it on here. We can share these slides afterwards. But basically, you fill out some basic information. Next step, you don't have to meet with your local alderman if you're in the ADU zone. Is this helping at all? You don't have to meet with the alderman necessarily, but it's always good to garnish their support. Okay, you're gonna need it on the next step, but basically, it's not that difficult to get a meeting with the alderman. You just got to go to their office, explain what you're looking to do, and then get on their calendar. Expect to be retraded on the time at least once or twice before you actually get the meeting done. So once you've kind of gotten those ducks in a row, you're going to need to hire an architect, because even though you're in the ADU zone, you still have to do everything by code and by the books. So not only does the unit you're adding have to get an architectural drawings for, you need it for the entire building, okay? Because there's going to be other elements that come into play that are important in the process, okay? The next piece is hire a contractor to then map out the work that's got to be done based off of the architectural plans, okay? And that's what's going to be submitted to the city with your permits through your contractor, your GC that you hire. And then ultimately, the last step is to actually execute the work. This is by far the hardest part of the process. Every inspector is a little bit different in what their expectations are. You might get two wildly different set of rules when it comes to what needs to be done, and I'll talk about some of those things that could cause some variation. So let's go to the next slide. All right, so I highlighted the additional parts. These are the only things that are materially different in the process, okay? So you don't need an attorney in the first step, and you don't need to go present in front of the zoning committee and wait for your approval, okay? When you're in the ADU zone. When you're not in the ADU zone, you need to do these steps, okay? So the alderman part of the process here is a little bit more important, okay? And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but they're gonna basically tell you what their requirements are. They might say, okay, I'll support your additional unit, but I need you to make it an affordable unit. And they're going to define how affordable they want it to be. Some aldermen are sophisticated enough to understand how math works, and will say, okay, I know this deal needs to make money for you, so you tell me what number you need your rent to be at, something like that. Some might tell you need to dedicate it towards Catholic charities or towards the refugee population, something like that that benefits the community. There might be a number of different things. My attorney told me not to even mention options because every alderman is going to be a little bit different on what they. We've been through this with a couple aldermen already, so we kind of have a few data points of what they've asked in the past. So whether you hire the attorney first or the alderman first, the first time we went through this, we met with the alderman first, and he goes, do you have an attorney? And I said, no, not yet. And he slips me a business card, right? And so that's like, that's a real Chicago thing to do, right? But like, the guy ended up being a really great attorney, and but if the alderman recommends an attorney for you, you do not turn that recommendation down. Because typically they know each other, and they know he knows what the other guy's going to want. So 1 and 2 here could be reversed, but maybe go in to the alderman first, feel him out, and then see if he offers you a recommendation. Go back one side. All right, so submitting the packet to the zoning committee, what does that look like? So all your architectural drawings, some basic information about the building, how many units, what are you trying to add, how big is it, is there green space? Green space is super important to the zoning committee. Are you on a bus line? Is there a train line near you? They're going to ask a bunch of questions and want a number of details. Because if you're adding a unit and there's no parking, they might even ask, do you have bike storage in the basement? So they're going to want to know, like, you're making this with all other things in mind. So adding density to an area that's already pretty dense, they want to make sure parking's not going to get more congested. They want to make sure you have other options outside of that. This could take several months, okay? So you submit the packet, you're either on the docket that next month or you're not, okay? And you might not know until like the day prior. So your attorney's gonna call you and be like, saddle up, we're going to court, you know? And, but usually he has a pretty good idea if you're further on the list. It took us 3 iterations to get us through. I think it's like the second or third Wednesday of the month. To go through it. Imagine like a big auditorium style thing, seating area, and They bring up case after case on a board, and your attorney gets up. You don't have to talk. Your attorney will talk for you unless you do it by yourself. They might ask you some questions, but usually if your alderman has given you the thumbs up already, then you've already gotten the blessing from the zoning committee. So it's more of a formality than anything. Let's see. Okay, and then the last couple steps are the same as prior. So in 2 buildings right now, we've gotten approval for a zoning change. Okay, so basically, why you need a zoning change in a non-ADU zone area. So most buildings, let's say you're turning a 6-unit to a 7-unit. Okay. Most 6 units are actually zoned like RM3, which makes them eligible. If they were rebuilt, you'd have to build a 3-unit residence on there or less. In order to qualify for 7 units, you have to get up to RM5 or RM5.5. So legally, in order to make this a legal unit, you need that zoning change. So that's why you have to do this when you're not in the ADU zone. Okay? And in reality, just to reiterate this, if you're in the ADU zone, you're just saving a little bit of money from the attorney and a little bit of time on the process. So it's really not that much different. You do have a chance where they deny you, but it's probably pretty rare unless you have a really compelling case to be denied. All right. So I talked about the hardest part of the process being the work getting done. Okay. So we're adding basement units in some of our buildings. So what makes that challenging? A lot of basement units don't have the required height. Okay, height is based off the volume in the space. So the inspector might say, oh, you need 7.5 feet of height or 7 feet of height. Well, there could be duct work. There could be areas where it's not 7 feet. So it's not a general. This is why this is hard to explain to everybody, because it's not a hard and fast rule. Water mains. Most buildings have 3/4-inch water main coming in. You want to add a unit, they're going to make you upgrade typically to 1.5-inch water main. It's a $22,000 to $40,000 increase in cost. So just be prepared for that. It sucks. If your building is on the same side of the street as the fire hydrant, that means you're on the same side of the street as the water main. Okay? It's usually a little cheaper. They don't have to block traffic. They don't have to cut all the way across the street. So consider yourself lucky if you're on the side with the fire hydrant. Weird things that you find out when doing the process. Okay? Electrical. Most buildings have 200 amps. Even if you have a 2-flat or a 8-unit, unless they've been rehabbed, most have 200 amp coming in. The city's going to make you do a load test on this. Typically, they say the minimum you could have is 400 for a building this size, but most of the time, even 400 is not going to pass the load test. So you have to either upgrade to 600 or 800. These panels are actually hard to get as of the last 4 years, even with COVID supply chain issues. So what we found is we're doing 2 buildings like this. We had to do 600 on one building and 800 on another because that's all they had. So there's not a huge material difference between the two cost-wise. 600 amp might be like 30 grand upgrade, and 800 might be 35,000. So, but still a really large expense in the grand scheme of things. So let's talk about costs real quick for all 3 of these. Electrical, we just said upgrade the building at least, I'd say 20 to 40 in that plan. Water main 20 to 40 as well, and then ceiling height. Whenever you're digging down in the basement, you open yourself up to a lot of other foundational problems too. Not problems necessarily, but do you have a French drain? Do you have to fix any beams? Do you have to fix any posts? Any foundation work that needs to get done? So, and you have to hand dig. So imagine, you got jackhammers and you're shoveling out thousands of pounds of debris. So it's not cheap. It's very labor intensive. So digging could be $15,000 to $20,000 to go a foot down below. So, all right, next slide. All right, I lumped a lot of these together, but these are also important pieces. Windows, right? Egress is important in adding ADUs. If you're under, I think it's 650 square feet, you only really need one main egress, but your windows have to be egressable as well. So they might make you add windows that you can climb out of. If your beams, doesn't matter if your beams are necessarily steel or not, but if they're showing any signs of deterioration, or your posts, we have posts that look like beavers have been chewing on them, so they're going to make us replace those, I'm pretty sure. We talked about egress, HVAC venting. This is an interesting one. We just got hit with a weird requirement that said that we need to vent out our HVAC systems. What the architect told us was 10 feet away from the building. Which doesn't make a lot of sense, so we're kind of fighting this one, but they either want you to connect to a chimney going up or running out a pipe going out the back of a building, which seems really strange and like an unnecessary expense. But so we're still navigating that one, so to be determined on how much it costs. Beams, expect 5 to 10 grand. Windows, 1,000 per probably, labor and material, and depends on what else is needed there. So next one. All right, so the math is the most important part of this equation. Does this make sense, right? So the first step is to determine how much rent can I get from this unit. So you could check with a local property manager. You could know how much rent you're going to get. You could have done it before, or the city might have put a cap on what's called a covenant. So when you make the alderman, early on in step one, usually they do this horse trading with you and they make you sign a covenant. And they're basically going to say, you're going to do X, Y, Z for X number of years. So in our case, one example is we had to do a affordable unit, 80% of AMI, which you can look up the standards, they haven't published. So for a one bedroom, your max rent might be $1,500. For a studio, your max rent might be $1,300. They haven't specified based off of an AMI level. So if the alderman or alderwoman establishes these rules, then make sure you know what that number is. In our case, is like we're debating between doing a studio apartment or a one bedroom. We know we can get more rent for the one bedroom. However, we're trying to get some cost savings out of doing a studio versus building a wall and a closet and whatever. So just all things to take into consideration. So let's say $1,500 is the amount you can get for your basement garden unit. Okay? Rehab budget to do a basement, we're looking between $150 and $160 for the full build out, inclusive of the water main increase, not inclusive of adding electrical. This is with electrical already done. Okay. Your cap rate's going to depend on what location you live in. Our cap rate is indicative of a neighborhood, not of of course, every property is selling at a cap rate price, but cap rate's market, location dependent. Okay, so we like to use 6.5% in the West Town Ukrainian Village market. It's a fairly good number to use right now for that area. But if it's a riskier area, higher cap rate. Less risky area, lower cap rate. Expense ratio. Okay, this is important to understand. So typically when we underwrite a building, if rent is $10,000, we're going to assume typically a 35% expense ratio. That's going to include utilities, that's going to include taxes, insurance, a maintenance expense, vacancy, I'm missing a few others. But basically, if you look over across the entirety of a portfolio of properties, you probably end up somewhere between 35 and 40% as an expense ratio. We use 35%. In this case, though, we're adding a unit, right? So all the other overhead from the building, all your other fixed or variable costs have already been absorbed. You're not really adding a lot more expense by adding one more unit, right? Maybe you're adding a little bit higher water bill. Maybe your common electric bill goes up a little bit. Maybe you got a little bit more maintenance because you have another unit. But by and large, your trash expense is the same. Your taxes are the same. Your insurance is the same. Hopefully. So we chop down that expense ratio a little bit here to 15% just to make better, more realistic math. Okay? So you guys can read the calculations, but essentially this is, in order to derive whether this makes sense, is does the nominal increase in the building value justify spending the money, right? In this case, in this example, it does. But there's a lot of other factors that go into this too, right? Are you financing this? Where is the money coming from? Is it coming from investors? Do you have to give up equity for it? So not everybody's situation is going to be the same. So just things to take into consideration. Let's go next slide. All right. So we talked a little bit about this, but every alderman, alderperson, alderwoman is going to have different requirements for what they want from you. One ward had a 20-person panel for us to present in front of, and they came back. We thought it was going to be like the most stringent requirements, but they came back and they were like, oh, you just have to dedicate the unit to the refugee population, which means you can rent it out for whatever you want, but it has to be dedicated towards the refugee population in some way, shape, or form. We've done this before. It's not as easy as it sounds, but we can talk about that a little bit during Q&A. Some of them might make you sign a covenant for 30 years. Some are as low as 5, but expect some type of time requirement from the alderman. Okay, they're gonna want if you want their thumbs up, they're gonna want something from you too. So just expect that. We talked about the expense ratio. When you're underwriting this thing, inclusive of the cost of building out the basement, attic, whatever you're going to do, be conservative with your numbers, right? I mentioned before that every inspector is a little bit different. Most GCs will joke, it's like, oh, what side of the bed did Inspector Joey wake up on today, right? And that's the rules you're going to have to abide by. So our contractor bid out this work that we're doing in the basement, and he added a what do you call it?
Contingency?
Yeah, well, he added a $10,000 contingency, which I was like, okay, hopefully we don't have to use this. And he's like, we're probably going to use this. So, so you got to expect there's going to be more money spent than you originally planned for. He added in a booster pump, though. Even though we're doubling the size of the water line coming in, he had this booster pump on there, and I'm like, why would we ever need a booster pump when we're doubling the size of the water main? He goes, well, I'm doing a building down in Hyde Park, and the inspector randomly came in and said, you need a booster pump. So I'm putting the line on a minute for it just in case he asks for that too. It's not to code. For an 1.5-inch water main, I guess you don't need a booster pump, so, but they made him do it. So there's a lot of variability here, so just expect the unexpected. I'd say here.
That was a pretty high line item, right? 15?
It's like 5 to 10, probably. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's material though. It's a big expense. So I think this is the last slide I had, but one thing. A couple more things. Expect to be a minimum 6-month process. Okay. If you're in the ADU zone, it's faster. Okay. But you still have to follow all the tricky code and architect and permit processes. So just to get a permit approved for something like this, it's minimum 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, so there's certain work you can get done while permit is being reviewed, but it's hard to truncate a timeline down when there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape in the way. So I guess I'll pause there. I glossed over a few things pretty quickly, but I guess any initial questions? Anybody have any thoughts, concerns, arguments? Anybody done this already before? All right. So I am the expert here. I can say whatever I want. What else do we run into? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say you mentioned Fairfield. Not really a good option.
Yeah. So here's something to consider too. Okay, that's a good point. We had a client that we managed their building for. They had a legal 3-unit. So legality of this is actually a good point because I want to bring this up and I didn't bring it up yet. Obviously, a legal 4-unit is worth more than a legal 3-unit, right? So if you're in the ADU zone or not, being able to add a legal unit, legal and conforming unit, the language is confusing, but a legal and conforming unit meaning the city approves it as a legal dwelling and it's done to code. It materially adds value to a house. Now, if you have a 3-unit and a bonus non-conforming 4th unit, you might get a little extra credit for it value-wise, but you might not. So an appraiser might come in and be like, no, it's a 3-unit. I don't care if that 4th unit's rented, I'm not counting it. So it could really it can really damage the value of the building. So that's why we're doing it to our buildings. We're adding the 7th legal unit. It should add a decent amount of value to it. Because normally, like when you're underwriting these things, sure you can count the rent on them if you look at it from a 5+ unit standpoint, but it's whether or not the appraiser values it or not, that's the bigger question. So the point being here though was we had a legal 3 unit that had an attic apartment, really small, 400 square feet maybe.
I lived in it.
Yeah, Kyle lived in it for a little bit. Had a kitchen. It was cute.
Good for me being single.
It's a great spot, but it didn't have like the required ceiling height. There were a lot of things that would need to be done if you wanted to make it legal. So they asked us to go down the rabbit hole of figuring out, okay, what would the next steps look like? So architects came out and they were like, all right, you got to increase the ceiling height here in the attic to get to that 7 feet mark. So now you got to dormer out the roof, right? Again, not an easy thing to do, not impossible, but not an easy thing to do. So what they decided to do instead was duplex the unit up. So they combined the 3rd and 4th floors basically. It's the I don't want to call it the poor man's version of adding it, but it's the easy way out. And sometimes I recommend this to my clients, right? Where I say like, if you don't have the money and the time to do a full conversion, just duplex it up. You're not, I hate to say it this way, but like you're really not susceptible to all the red tape and the rules that you otherwise would be by adding a unit. Now, if you're asking so I'll use the math on this. So adding the third and 4th floor together, we were able to get $2,600 in rent for those two. But separately, we'd probably be able to get $3,000 in rent. Separate legal units are always more valuable than combined. Okay, that's always the case. Will never not be the case. Separate is always more. However, combining them together, it took a while to rent. It was a really clunky space, but it was cheaper.
And timing on construction is important too.
Yeah, and then
construction finished like the week of Thanksgiving. So then I had to try to rent it in the dead of winter, and it was already like a small space up top. So you had to find like the right tenant, and that took until April.
Yeah. So always consider unique spaces are sometimes hard to rent. Timing matters and when these hit the market, right? So if you hit between late February and August, July, August, you're going to get max rent. If you're outside that window, it's going to take you longer and you're going to get less money. So, sorry, thank you for that point. What were you going to ask? Sorry.
You basically answered the question. It was more like pros and cons of doing it legally or just kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah, so that's a great, so I touched on that a little bit, right? Obviously a legal additional unit comes with a value attached to it. But can you do it cheaper illegally? I mean, yes.
But not duplexing, doing an
right.
actual...
So actually adding a 4th unit
without going through the...
Yeah, without going through the process, of course. People do it all the time. That's why they created this ADU process, but you still have to follow a lot of rules, okay? You're really only saving attorney fees and some other like court filing fees. So there's really it's still hard, right? So yeah, you can do it. You can add a basement unit illegally if you wanted to. You run some risks, right? Somebody were to pop in, if a tenant were to complain about a noise violation, and you don't have a permit posted in the window.
Sell and the buyer's like, I want legality.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, if you did it illegally, which the unit you're in now was done illegally years ago before us, you could still trade these things, but whether or not an appraiser counts it towards the rent is a whole other story. So the other thing to consider too is for anything that's, this is weird, but anything that's 5 residential units and below is different than your normal 5+ being commercial versus residential. If you're 5 residential units and below, the city has to issue a zoning certificate for you before closing, okay? So this is going to determine how many legal units you have. But if you're above, if you're 6 units or above, they don't do it. So we just had this problem the other day. We're buying a 5-unit building, But
Turns out it's 4.
the zoning cert came back and it's 4 units. How did they determine this? Well, if permits were pulled when these units were done years ago, and it's got the right amount of egresses and it looks like a unit, usually you get credit for it. It was done in the past, but you have to have pulled permits. A lot of times they'll look at electrical permits. How many electrical boxes were created in this process? And they'll say, okay, there's 6 electrical panels, 6 dwelling units, right? So the zoning cert is important. It's going to determine partially the value of your building, partially how many legal units you have. So it could. So Winchester being the example, so we have a property that only had 4 panels. The basement was tied to, actually the 3rd floor was the owner's unit.
But it wasn't legal 4.
It was a legal 4 unit. They just had the public and the owner's old unit, the top floor tied together. So
You can see like all of the variations of these different things.
there's a lot. So that's why I say every property is a little bit different. So. Any other questions?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't think I have any other slides up here. What's up?
Would you swap out the hot wiring?
Yeah, so I don't know if the city would make you, but they probably will. If you're going to upgrade electric to the building, you're most likely makes sense to get rid of cloth wiring. But you could still have modern panels, I believe, with old cloth wiring. It just, it's expensive. Like repulling wire for a unit, it's not a cheap expense, but there's a lot of danger associated with cloth wiring. I had it in some buildings, and I don't have any buildings here with it, but we have a portfolio in Cleveland, and most of them have cloth wire, and it's 5 figures. Getting these buildings back on track. So minimum, right? So depending on the scope and the size and all that stuff. But who knows? They could last another 100 years. It's like one of those things where it's it's usually a combination of things that cause problems. So
Is there preventative things you can do to?
I'd have to ask. I know just enough to sound smart with electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. I hope to one day own a HVAC, plumbing, electrical company, but as far as doing the actual work, I probably am not going to be qualified for it. But I'd have to ask the question for sure.
In Cleveland, do you have any issues with insurance with cloth wiring?
Yeah, they ask about it, and your premiums typically do go up if you have it. That or knob and tube, there's a lot of different names for it. But yeah, it's like question number 1 that they ask there. Because a lot of the buildings have them. So it does cause your premiums to go up for sure. So it's a question they ask here too, but they don't call it out specifically. A lot of times it's when was the electrical upgraded, and that usually goes hand in hand with when was the wiring upgraded to, not just the panels. But yeah, they ask about that a lot for sure. Yeah. So. Is your question?
Yeah, so back to the expenses associated with adding, when you mention taxes, you're taxes don't go up quickly, but you're pulling a permit, so they're gonna see improvements. You're also adding a unit, so you're adding square footage. What have you seen actually happen on the tax burdens?
All right, so we're talking about two separate departments in a already mangled government, right? The chances of them talking to each other are usually pretty low, and so I say pretty. So here's what most people will tell you in these scenarios. If you're going to rehab a building, make it as luxury high-end as you can, because the city will never know how much money you put into it and how luxury the units are. So you're only going to be taxed on it if there are basic units. They never know how much you rent them for. So yes, they could potentially know that you've added a 7th unit there. Typically, they won't find out until you sell the building, because that's usually when that data starts to change hands. Because the zoning department and the Department of Revenue, or I don't know what is the tax group called, Fitz Kagi's group.
Assessor's office.
Assessor's office. Thank you. They usually don't share data that much. When they're developing the value of the building, they're going to look at other like buildings in the area. As far as they know, it's still a 6 unit. That's what traded for the last time. It should show up in one of the systems, zoning department or the Department of Buildings, in their records as like we added a 7th unit, but it's not as easy as it should be, right? So yeah, so likely you won't get a tax hit until the property trades hands. So, at least that's been my experience.
I guess to tack on to that, this isn't related to the ADU thing, but it is related to taxes. So when you're helping a client buy a building for $1 million that's assessed for 400, how do you kind of project, given that there will be?
Yeah, I mean, and you 2.1, 2.18. If you Google what the average tax rate in Chicago is, it's going to say 2.1%, something like that. So that's what I usually model in for clients whenever they're buying. Well, this happens way more than you think, or maybe not way more, but it happens a ton, right? We're like exactly that scenario. Someone's buying $1 million floor flat, and it's being assessed at $400,000. Now, in year 1, it's not going to probably go up. Taxes are in arrears, right? So it's probably going to take another full cycle but within 3 years, that property is going to go up for sure. So I will say this too. We own 2 buildings, 4 houses away from each other. One's a 4 unit that we paid $1 million for, and one's a 6 unit that we paid 1.4. Okay. The 6 unit pays $17,000 in taxes, and the 4 unit pays $29,000 in taxes. Make sense of it, right? Make sense of it. So yeah, make it make sense. It doesn't. So Walton versus Ashland.
That's the split.
Ashland is $17,000, 6 unit building with a commercial space, so. My theory is that it went up dramatically. The assessor's office is going after the 2, 3, and 4 unit folks because they think they have more disposable income. If you're an owner of one of those buildings, you might be living in one unit and renting the others.
What's crazier about that is how close they are.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a 10-second walk.
Yeah. They're four houses away from each other. So that's why the system that they use or however they do this is not accurate. And I always tell my friends, like, they're like, oh yeah, let's the mansion tax great. It's like, yeah, for somebody that actually owns a mansion, but when you're talking about these multifamily buildings, like, where do you think the taxes are just going to get passed down to the tenants, right? It's like, if I own a building, I'm not losing money on the thing, right? So who's going to absorb this? The tenants are, and who's going to screw the tenants? So taxes are all great until it's you that's got to pay them, you know. So sorry, my soapbox. What else?
Do you have any experience with like garages or coach houses?
Yeah. All right. So I'm not even gonna like attempt to dive into the coach house rules because they're like a whole nother set of it's like a whole nother enigma because most buildings now, if they had a big backyard, most of them, the city will tell you that you're not allowed to add a coach house to this unless it was already existing there. Okay? If it was grandfathered in, you could do it. If there's not one there, you can build a garage, but as far as like an additional dwelling unit, there are way more rules for coach houses than there are for like basements or attics, okay? So if the existing structure's there, you're typically okay. But like, if you got a garage, you can't be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna add like 2 more stories to this garage. There's like setback rules, there's there's side rules, how far you can be away from the building next to you. There's certain height requirements for coach houses, so it's a whole other animal. And what you're zoned at with a coach house, like, really matters. Because if you're like RM3 and below, like you could almost kiss a coach house goodbye unless you get like a really good variance to allow for it. And again, too, like, zoning can all be changed. Like, you can get a variance for everything, pretty much. Some things just take more effort than others. So,
I ran into that with Ryan and Brendan.
Yeah.
So we saw a building in Pilsen, one of my clients, and pretty much, I'd say, going east and west from the building that we went to see, right? 3 this way and 4 this way, all had coach houses, but this one did not. They wanted to look into, well, the garage that's there, it's about to fall apart, so let's do what's it called?
203K.
203K construction loan. Tear down the garage, build a coach house in back. It got shot down immediately because that block's not zoned that way, and all the other coach houses were grandfathered in. So like they were like, nope, it's never gonna happen. Just move on.
yeah, it's coach houses have a unique set of rules. So it's like, I would say, don't ever assume you're going to be able to build a coach house unless there's one that's already existing there. So.
Do you need zoning changes or anything for like a garage rooftop?
No, I don't think you need a zoning change. If there's no garage there that's existing right now, you might, but I don't think so. I don't think you need a zoning change for that.
Have you done that before too, or no?
Not a rooftop on top of we've rebuilt garages before.
Yeah.
You need a permit for that. So some contractors will be like, oh yeah, you don't need a permit for a garage. You need a permit for a garage.
Oh, you mean a rooftop like where you could be up?
Yeah. So like, don't try to. So like, you can do whatever you want without a permit, but sometimes it can bite you in the ass. So that happened with us. Our contractors, like, this is years ago. It's like before we knew better. Like, garage, don't worry about it. We'll get this thing up in 2 days. And then. We're gonna go do that Saturday and Sunday. Whenever they say they're gonna work on a weekend, the city's not working. That's it. So that's a funny story. That what happened was our garage fell down in a big storm 4 or 5 years ago. It wasn't really a garage, more of a goat pen. I'm not even kidding. It was like an 1892 house in Wicker Park, and it literally had a one-car garage and then goat stalls on the side of it. And so we had a heavy snow, and luckily we had a guy that parked the car in there, never touched it. I think the rats probably just ate this car all day long. But eventually, he was like, hey guys, I'm going to just tow my car out of here. And then 2 days later, the big collapse. And we're like, how that happened is beyond me. But it was just a huge snow. So then a neighbor, I guess, called the city and like, oh, there's a collapsed garage roof, instead of calling us. Of course our tenants called us, but like a week later we had a new garage. So I was, oh yeah, you don't need a permit, blah, blah. Well, that violation, when they called out, it triggered a violation of the property. We got the city, we had to go and we had to end up paying money to the city, whatever, go to a bunch of different hearings. It was really stupid, but we went to go rectify the issue, and they're like, oh, sure, you can get a permit done, but the electrical wasn't done right. So now you need an electrical contractor to pull a permit for the electric. And then they said, oh, well, the electric's done right now, but the panel isn't done right. You need a fifth public panel, and that's going to be rewired. So it turned into this big rabbit hole thing. So just do it right the first time. That's my advice to everybody. You can be sneaky and try to get away with stuff, but eventually the shit comes and kicks you in the ass. So,
Andrew, you got to throw the mic drop in there.
For what?
But it's still not close.
Oh yeah, that's not a mic drop. That's not a good thing. So yeah, this happened. The garage collapsed in 2020, right before COVID, winter before COVID, and we're still. We got the panel fixed like 2 weeks ago. We're still dealing with this. So 4 years. Now COVID didn't help anything, but. It is a very slow process to get anything taken care of in the city. So. Who's got non-ADU questions? Anything I can help with?
I got a question. Yeah, 4-unit building, and the water bill can be a huge expense. And you or any of your clients try to individually meter each unit?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and so there's some debates around legality of sub-metering water. Typically in Chicago, people are I don't want to say it's illegal. Some attorneys might differ, but like the rule of thumb is you're not allowed to sub-meter. What you can do is something called a RUB system, so ratio utility billing system, something like that. So basically, what it does is it takes the water bill and divides it up by the square footage of the units, right? Similar to what commercial units do. However, you have to be very explicit within your lease, right? Like that you're not paying for water. So yes, that's probably the better way to do it. I would say that sub-metering is probably not it's a fairly decent expense to do it. The water department's not going to allow you to do it then. Well, so I should say they're not going to allow you to do it. You could probably put some form of a flow meter on every individual main going to the units, but the water department itself isn't going to separately bill each tenant. So you'd have to do it yourself and bill them back anyway. So it's not, to me, it's not worth it. Just chop the bill up. If you get a high water bill in Chicago, there's a couple of reasons for it usually. Either you got literally a toilet that's running nonstop, and a tenant that hasn't called you about it, and they're probably just thinking like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. A running toilet can cost you like hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month.
Like 6 in the last 6 months.
And like, so sometimes it's good to like check in, if you see like an abnormal water bill, call the tenants and be like, hey, you see me, like, you're a toilet hissing and all?
Oh yeah, it never fills up, it just runs all day.
Just runs all the time.
Like, why didn't you
just drains my shit all day long, there's also a way to check too. Most of water meters are on the street in front. Some of them are in the back of the buildings. You can pull up the box in the front and see if the needle's going constantly. Even if it's slow, that means you got a constant drip somewhere, so then you got to find it.
Yeah, nobody knows that. I'm sure a lot of you guys do. If you look at a water meter and it's moving at all, like where you can actually watch it move that fast, something's wrong. You should have to sit there for a good long while before it moves visibly. So if you're seeing it do like even this much movement, that's bad. That's a problem.
Do you experience sagging with houses at all, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I usually bring a marble to showings, just to see which direction it is. We see leaning, sagging. If you say like in the middle of the building, I mean your unit was the worst case.
Where was that insight when I got my license?
Yeah, so sorry, I keep it in the car.
You're talking about 41?
Yeah, 41. We had a big dip in one of our units, and it was a beam, and so you got to reinforce it, build up the floor. It's not if you got slight sagging, like this might be indicative of a bigger problem, but it also could stay that way and stay the same way for the next 20 years. So not cheap to address, but like also maybe not the end of the world. So sometimes that stuff. Now if it starts getting more and more serious, then you might think about addressing it. A normal general contractor would have they're probably going to bring in a steel guy for a beam. They might have a separate sub for that, and then just normal carpenter to build up the floors to the right level height, and then a flooring guy to lay the flooring, and so it's like a GC would be able to quarterback the whole thing. But yeah, you're talking like a beam guy, a floor guy, and a carpenter, maybe. So that would probably do it. What else? Anything property-wise? Any questions? Ashwood's got a unique situation going on right now. So Ashwood's buying a property that's a 3-unit building, and it came back as a 1 dwelling unit in the zoning cert. And then they said, okay, maybe not 1, we'll give you 2. Even though it sold 3 years ago and it had a zoning cert that said it was 3 dwelling units. So what happened was it was a unit in the front and then a two flat in the back. Okay, the unit in front years ago was a commercial building, somewhere 30, 40, 50 years ago. We don't know when it was converted. It was not done legally. This is why doing it legally sometimes helps. And zoning certs are only good for 1 year. Okay, so just because you got a zoning cert when you bought a place does not mean it's going to be the same when you sell a place. 1 year they're good for. Yeah, it's fucked. It's the city's way of getting you getting on your way in, getting you on the way out. So in Ashland's case, they said no, sorry, it's only 2 dwelling units. We're not going to give you credit for the commercial storefront because we don't know when it was done and we don't know if it's got enough egresses and all that stuff. So now we're going through this long fight to increase the zoning, and then they gotta send their architect out to do the drawings, then resubmit to the city to make sure that we can count that as a legal dwelling unit. And literally, the selling agent, thank God she's really good, but she's like reaching out to like old neighbors and old owners from 20, 30 years ago. She like got the census records from the 90s to see if anybody could attest to that being a residential versus a commercial unit. Because if you're past 20 years, I think they like grandfather you in almost. So maybe that's the trick. Just buy real estate and wait for a really long time. Hope you don't make fun. What else? Anything?
What about zoning for rooftops?
You know, it's your actual zoning of the property isn't gonna determine whether or not you would do a rooftop. I'd have to direct you to an attorney on this one, but I think it's just going to be with the building department whether they would structural, give you a permit to do the work and whether they bless off on that or not. Because you got to put railings up, you got to have it level, you got to have drainage. There's probably a lot of rules to it. I've never done one. We have a bunch of buildings that like have access to the roofs that I'm sure people use. Most of our ACs are up there, but we've never built like a rooftop deck. So yeah, you probably just have to go through the permitting process for that.
This is very specific, but I woke up to a text this morning. A garage got broken into. My tenants had their lights stolen. Do you guys do anything around securing garages, cameras, motion sensor lights, anything you'd recommend on that front?
Depends. I mean, it really depends on how much money you're willing to spend, right? Some tenants might get really angry and be like, well, why don't we have cameras? We need more security, blah, blah. Motion lights, that's an easy one, right? We do have cameras at some of our properties. I'll tell a funny story or not so funny story after this, but there are some cheaper options for cameras out there that, and a lot of times it's just like a deterrent. Like some people say like, put a fake one up and like, or sign like you're, smile, you're on camera. But like, a lot of it is like making sure people are locking doors, or putting signs up that say lock the door behind you, just to make people think about it a second time. Because most of these crimes are not planned out, right? It's a crime of opportunity when they see a garage door crept open an inch and they're like, oh, let me see what's in there. They go in, like, gone, matter of seconds, right? So you take away those opportunities, right? And like that decreases a bit. So I would say put in some procedures in place that'll wipe out 50% of the problem, and then put in some deterrent factors, lights, camera, signs, things like that. I think is your best bet. Fencing, if there's if you could lock the fencing from the inside, or just key gate or key a gate instead of somebody being able to just like push it open. That's what I would probably do first before you went any further. But like, you're gonna have instances where tenants are like, well, I demand you do X, Y, Z, right? Like, come up with some cheaper options. High-tech shit isn't always like, we've had people literally break into a window, climb into a window using a screwdriver in the broad daylight on a busy street, right? Like, criminals would do, and on camera too. So like, tell me you're gonna get a Rottweiler from the backyard.
Look right at it too. Look right at it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look at the camera, like smiling. So if they're gonna want to do something, criminals will do stuff, So yeah, I would just invest in some small things and like, make it look like you're making an effort at fixing the problem. And I mean, it really, that's what really tenants want mostly is like, okay, I want to see some level of effort that you care, right? Obviously, you want to protect their stuff, so lights, locks, signs, things like that.
To add to that, so That happened at the building that I live in. It was a freak day that I was at his house working for the day. Not that I'm proud of this, but I'm a smoker. And the amount of time that he was inside the fenced area of my building, I would have walked outside to smoke at one point or another, and I would have stopped him physically. But on top of that, going back to putting up the signage, like, hey, make sure you're closing the doors. The building I live in has coded entry where you have to put in a code that's electronic buzz for the front and the side door into the building itself. But he got in because somebody walked out the back gate to the alley that has nothing on it but a key, and they didn't latch it. So it was just sitting touching, and he walked by and pressed it on the camera. I see him do it. So, like, opportunity, he just touched it, and he was like, oh, I'm in now.
So the more tenants that like are aware of this, right? Like, okay, I gotta shut this gate every time, and you know, sometimes it's just greasing up the gate, the hinges on the gates though too, right? So that they shut the way they're supposed to, and so like it could be something as easy as that. So.
You guys take security deposits?
No.
Chicago?
What was that?
Security deposits. So we have some clients that do and want them, but we only do the non-refundable movement fees here. Most attorneys will guide you away from a security deposit because there's just way too many lawsuits around them. If you were to enter a unit illegally, they could sue you for 1 month security deposit. They can still sue you for stuff, but there's way more rules. You have to hold in a certain type of account. There's only certain banks that do them. It's not worth it. Just take the movement fee and pick good tenants, and then you'll be okay.
How do you decide the amount of percentage or?
Yeah, so we're like we kind of have a little bit of a swag to it. It's like around like a quarter of a month's rent.
So it's a win-win for me because like even just today, before I got here, I had a showing for a brand new condo that we're now managing. First time I've shown it, but one benefit I've seen is like, just like he said, you know, it's such a hassle on our side to hold the deposits. But when you're able to tell someone, hey, you're not going to have to come up with $6,000 to move in. It's going to be a moving fee and rent fee. That's, you know, and it's a quarter of the rent. So, like, I mean, who's got $6,000? You know, if they're looking for a 2-bedroom apartment, it's a couple. They're trying to find a new spot. Like, hearing, oh, we only need $500 so we can secure this. And then it's just normal rent. So it's a win-win on both sides. For
Too many rules. Even when somebody moves out, it's like you're only like distinguishing between normal wear and tear and what was negligent, and it's too hard, and then they can easily come back with a lawsuit trying to fight you. So it's not worth it.
Yeah, so we explained, like, you know, half of this move-in fee is going to be the cleaning. So say it's $500. $250 is going to be the cleaning. Maybe, you know, $150 is going to be replacing some blinds. If you have a dog, sometimes they jump on them. It's a win-win. So much easier to deal with.
Something to know about though too is that a lot of people don't understand. Move-in fees do not transfer like security deposits do though. So if you have a security deposit in place and you sell a place, security deposit goes from seller to new owner. Move-in fees, though, they're treated as revenue upon acceptance, upon reception. So pet fees, the same thing. We've argued that, okay, pet fee is to help clean up for after pet. Actually, what the lawyers determined was a pet fee is a pet interview. So you're determining the breed, you're determining, if there's going to be any additional requirements you need to do on the bill. It sounds stupid, but this is what attorneys have come up with. So pet fees have been determined to be revenue as well upon reception. So because we were like, oh, they still have the pets in the unit. I want to be able to clean up after the pet destroys stuff. And they said, nope, sorry, that's it's long gone now. So, but it's an interesting point to distinguish. Security deposits, though, will transfer to new owners.
What about pets versus no pets?
Always.
How much time do we have?
Always pets.
Okay, so everyone's got a dog these days, right? Like it's really hard to. I like to say that we don't discriminate against any pets, but I really hate cats.
Cats are worse than dogs.
Cats are way worse than dogs.
No fun.
Yeah.
Hair and in places that you don't see during the cleaning.
Smell.
Inside the vents, yeah.
We've had people that use a pantry as like just a litter box, no litter box.
Oh yeah, like literally put the litter on the floor.
Yeah.
And that was the litter box.
Yeah. We've also had though like dogs chew up molding and floors and walls and so it's the owner, it's not the pet usually, but most people come with pets these days, and the ones that have dogs, and you tell them there's no dogs allowed, they'll come up with a service animal card, and then you can't discriminate apparently. So
Or they walk away.
yeah, right, or they go somewhere
And
else.
they're like, on paper, aside from the animal, just A+ tenant. And then you tell them, oh, you have a Rottweiler. We don't say no to that.
We don't have breed or size restrictions. Probably at least 50% of our tenants have animals of some sort. We don't have anything exotic that I can think of. But
We have one turtle,
yeah,
but a little turtle.
Mike wants a turtle. New tenant asked if he could borrow his cousin's turtle.
Oh,
He wants it.
at 111?
Yeah, it's like $10. Yeah. There's a turtle fee. There's a special turtle fee. What else? Ask me anything, and then we can go back to drinking.
Right now, I'm renovating a garden unit. Okay. To me, it's new. It's built in 2008.
Okay.
Flooring. I was thinking possibly polished concrete or doing the
LVP or
life
Can
glue from Home Depot.
can I take this one?
sure.
I live in a garden unit right now, and it's a polished concrete floor. I fucking love it. It's easy to clean. It looks nice.
It looks slick as shit, dude. Yeah.
It keeps the unit cool when it's hot out. I don't have to run the air if I don't want to.
You don't have to really. It's not a lot to fix or you don't have to replace it. It doesn't matter if it gets wet.
He's got it.
Yeah, right. It's,
Exactly.
it's so to me, it's like the best of both worlds. So we try to do that whenever we can.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Personal preference, but yeah, I think it's got a lot of
Any
evidence.
recommendations as far as company?
We should ask, what was his name that owned Jake?
Yeah, he might have did it himself though, because he was good at that stuff. Let me get back to you on that one. I have somebody in mind, but I don't know if. Yeah, I'll get back to you. I think I got somebody, but I want to make sure first. So.
For those of us who have tenants with dogs, I have one where they use the front lawn, so the grass, and then I got a little retaining wall with mulch, and it pisses all over the grass, so it's dying in a bunch of areas. He digs in the mulch. What do you recommend as like?
See, that's different.
It's
We don't have a lot of buildings that have yardage like that, where they have destructive pets, so we've not really run into that.
we've dealt with a lot of shit more than the digging and stuff. We have a leash rider now that we attach, and like you can call out things like this, right? Like if you have a pet, you're responsible for fixing the yard when the yard gets messed up. You're responsible for picking up after your dogs. If you don't, there's a fine. Our partner sometimes will be like, tell them that we're going to do a DNA test on the dog's poop so we know which unit it is. And I'm like, come on, dude. So it's sometimes hard though to determine whose dog it was. And,
Another thing you can do, and we've kind of shied away from doing this because we don't have any tenants with destructive dogs right now. But if you know it's them, and you go talk to them, you're like, look, the dog's messing up the mulch. It's going to cost me money to fix this. So either A, take a dog somewhere else to get their fun in, or B, I'm gonna add a monthly pet tax or a monthly pet fee of $25 a month, so that I can cover my costs of fixing it.
I already charge them pet rent, what it would be.
Yeah, on top of that, yeah. I would say make sure your lease has got enough language in there to like cover all these weird things. Like, sorry, you signed it right here, paragraph 905-3-2-1. So so there's no confusion, but like, it's tough to navigate some of those issues. Some people might argue with you and fight you with it,
Or say, I'm gonna leave then.
yeah, okay. What we learned over the years too is that like we get a lot of tenants that are like that threaten you and stuff, right? Specifically like when you raise their rent and they're like, well, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna report to this. And, like most of the time it's empty, and it's like I used to get real worked up about it. Like, oh no, like what are we gonna do? They're gonna get mad at us, and like now it's like, all right, see you later. Go find another place to live.
But we also have never once raised the rent in any exorbitant amount, like percentage-wise.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean it's usually other things that lead to that stuff, but like we're not like trying to push the envelope on most of that stuff. But.
Do you read the lease to them? Read the lease with them? Do you request that or?
So
Give it to them?
no, we haven't. I've had property managers in the past that have like done presentations with their tenants.
Yeah.
I think if you screen right, like you're typically going to get some good folks in there. Normal people. In the lower income spots, sometimes this happens more. Where like some of them just might not. You might get a lower or a higher risk tenant that's prone to more negligent behavior. Hope I didn't stumble on any weird words there and get in trouble.
Very PC.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, if I may.
Yeah.
So I do all of our rental leases. So going back to the fact that we have a lease rider, right? We wrote that together and figured out what we wanted to put in there. But so the lease rider has 37 line items. They're all different. Like one has to do with if you get locked out after hours. You can't get a hold of me 'cause it's Saturday night at 10. You got to pay for the locksmith. That kind of stuff. It's 37 points. We do all of our leases through DocuSign. So whenever I draft a lease, when I get, you have the Chicago residential lease. The signatures go where they go on that top part. Lease rider, I put a signature block next to each of the 37 items. So if they ever try to say anything, like, you had to read
Your
this.
eyes had to hit this, right?
Right. Initials or signatures, same thing.
Well, yeah, sorry. I put an initial next to each of the 37 blocks, and at the end of the lease rider is the signature and date for each tenant. So there's no way to combat. You had to read all 37, or at least click on a button. So that's on you. And again, none of our rules are out of the ordinary. Quiet hours, don't be partying after 10. If you are, talk to your neighbor like an adult. Be like, hey, I'm going to have a party tonight. It's like, cool, it's Friday. Be a human being. So
I'd say like if you have a small portfolio, it's still possible to do that. Get that level of intimacy with a tenant, like go through and hit the important parts, or at least the things that are important. Even once you scale, it gets a little bit more challenging, time consuming. But I think there's like your welcome email is important, right? We send a welcome email. We talk about a few things in there. Maybe that's a place where you can call out the important stuff, right? You have a pet, hey, listen, make sure you take care of your pet, make sure they're not pooping everywhere, call out the stuff that means something to you, What else we got? You guys just want to drink, we can drink a few more and then call it a day, too. But I can stick around and answer any questions. I'm on like year 17 of this, of property investing. So 2007, I bought my first floor flat. And it was a weird year to buy stuff. I can at some point in time I'll tell the origin story again, but I made a lot of mistakes. I try to help my clients now kind of learn from those mistakes. So I help people buy and sell real estate. We own a management company here now. Do a lot of rehabs. I hate rehabs. We do them. A lot of times the only way to really make money in this in the business now is like, you gotta force appreciation, you gotta force value into some of these buildings. But yeah, I help a lot of veterans use their VA loans too to buy multifamily real estate. That's like it's the most incredible niche that's out there, as you know. So yeah, been out 17 years. I've seen almost everything you can think of. Evictions, dogfighting rings, murders, bed bugs, every bad thing under the sun, drive-by shootings,
Flying bags of
flying poop, not even bags of poop. They didn't have dignity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I was the victim of one
Yeah.
night at one of our buildings. That was fiasco.
Yeah, we got a funny poop story, but tenants, owners, everything involved in real estate can be weird, right? So just be prepared for everything. Every day is like is an adventure. So yeah, ask any questions you guys want. We can hang out and drink more beers, but we'll probably do this again in like 6 or 8 weeks or less. Probably less. Less is probably better. Yeah, you guys could. We have a couple Facebook group. Check out our website. I'm like the most accessible human in the world, probably to my detriment. But I'll talk to anybody and anyone about real estate anytime. So.